Welcome back to the Feminine Frequency podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Gatto, and today I am joined by Nikki Sunshine, who is a birth educator and birth attendant. Hey, Nikki, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy that you decided to join us here and share more about you and your work. Do you want to start us off by giving us a little bit of your personal story and how you got into doing what you do?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So, um, I guess the first thing that got me into healing work, I got into healing work pretty early on. I did a dual enrollment program. So, for people that don't know, I took high school courses and college courses simultaneously at a local community college. And I was lucky enough to graduate with high school with an associate's degree in complementary healthcare, which is basically like natural or holistic health. And then from there, I knew I wanted to become a yoga teacher. So I did my yoga teacher training program in Baja California, Mexico when I was 19. And I taught yoga for a couple of years, but I just felt like there was something missing. Like I wanted to dive deeper into healing work, and I was just kind of trying to figure out where I was going from there. And somehow I discovered midwifery and home birth. At this point, I was like 20 or 21 years old. So I hadn't had my own children yet. I had never attended a birth. I didn't really know much about pregnancy or birth at all. I just had like a really strong calling to specifically women's healing work and even more specifically birth work and home birth. So I
Wow.
went on Google and I looked up, how do I become a midwife? And of course, what came up was the more medicalized route to midwifery, which would be, get your bachelor's degree in nursing, and then from there get like a specialized nursing midwifery degree, which would be a master's degree or a doctorate. And I knew that I wanted to do birth work, so I was like, all right, this is what I have to do.
Mm,
And I started nursing school. And of course, as a more natural-minded person, it didn't like exactly jive with the natural healing side of me, but I was willing to go through it to get to my end point of midwifery.
yeah.
And I started dating my now husband, and he told me that he had used to live with a home birth midwife, actually. And he's like, you don't have to go to nursing school to become a midwife. And yeah, it was just weird, like
Wow.
all of the synchronicities and how like divine intervention or whatever, it all came together. And he introduced me to a local midwife. I finished the portion of nursing school I was in, so I am a nurse, a licensed nurse. But yeah, from there, I started apprenticing with a local midwife, and I was on track to become a medical home birth midwife or a CPM. Some people know it as that.
Okay.
And um, and yeah, one thing led to another, and I realized that that wasn't exactly how I wanted to support women. I came across something called the Free Birth Society and the Free Birth Society podcast. Emily Saldea and Yolanda Norris Clark. I did a an apprenticeship or a program with them, and I really dived into, I guess, what you could call traditional birth attendants or non-medical midwifery. And I kind of transitioned out of like that typical CPM medical midwife role. And then now I call myself a traditional birth attendant or non-medical birth attendant. But yeah, now I kind of support women completely out of the system. And that's like a little
Yeah.
like summary of how I made it from
Yeah.
nursing midwifery into like supporting women completely out of the system.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting how, you tried different angles and approaches and then ultimately came to what really resonated with you
Mhm.
and your vision and your goal. So I'm wondering, is it like being a doula? Is that
So
similar?
it's a little different.
Yeah.
So I actually have worked as a doula before. So while I was training to become a medical midwife during my apprenticeship, I was supporting women as a doula. So for people who don't know the difference between a midwife and a midwife is typically more like medical support. So similarly to like an obstetrician or a doctor, definitely different like scopes of practice there, but it's more similar to that role where they're conducting prenatal care and then like monitoring the mother and the baby and then doing like observations of the mother and the baby during the birth process and like any interventions. So midwives can actually do quite a bit of things like medical midwives. They can do sutures, they take blood pressure, they listen to fetal heart tones, they can draw labs and do all that sort of medical stuff, but just usually in the home setting, where doulas are strictly non-medical support and they're more like mental and emotional support. So now what I'm doing is kind of a combination of the two, if that makes sense,
Okay.
where I'm doing a little bit more of the hands-on support that a midwife would do and walking with women throughout typically their entire pregnancy, through their birth and the postpartum process.
Oh,
But I'm
wow.
doing that in more of like a non-medical scope of practice. Um, so yeah, it
Yeah.
can be like quite confusing, but typically like a lot of the women that I'm working with are more, if anybody's familiar with the term free birth, it's very similar to free birth where women are birthing really without a medical provider there. And sometimes women birth completely alone, which is how I had my daughter. It was pretty much just me there. I had a free birth. Um,
Wow.
but some women also choose to have like a trusted birth attendant there, maybe some family members or their partner. So I kind of support women in that scope. So I hope
Interesting.
that explained it well.
Yeah, that's super helpful, actually. Thank you. And I didn't realize that you were, uh, I guess, helping women throughout their pregnancy, that you
Mm,
were
yeah.
actually there, and not just during the birth, but
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
and it's
really
it's
cool.
different for everybody. I have a few different packages. In my like how I show up for women is constantly evolving, but I actually just added some new packages to my website that kind of like resonate more with me. Like I said, I'm constantly trying to evolve my offerings to support women in the best capacity that I can. But so I have a few different packages that include various like amounts of prenatal care. Sometimes I'll also do like mindfulness and yoga things with the prenatal care. And then the birth support itself also looks differently as well. So depending on like what women feel like they're needing for support. So it's very customizable what I'm doing these days, and it definitely revolves around what the specific woman needs as an individual. So I try to like always try
I
to
love
always express that we're all individuals. We all
it.
need different things. Some women really want to birth in more of a medical capacity, either in the hospital or at home with a more medical birth attendant. And, that's great for them. And there are birth attendants that can offer that sort of thing. And then there's also some women who want more of a undisturbed, natural physiological birth. And I support those women.
Okay, great. Do you want to share about your birth experience?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
recently had a baby, right?
Yeah, so my daughter is about 4.5 months now. She was born April 8th, a couple hours before the eclipse. So
Wow.
that was really funny. I
Yeah.
was joking throughout my whole, like the end of my pregnancy, like, oh, I bet she's gonna be born on the eclipse. Uh, so I kept joking about that. But when I went into labor the morning of the eclipse, I was completely caught off guard. Like I
Especially
really
with your
didn't
last name,
expect it.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if I manifested it or I know sometimes like the full moon can cause like trigger the
Yeah.
birth process in a lot of women. So, I mean,
Yeah.
even labor and delivery wards in the hospital, sometimes they'll staff more nurses if
That's what
there's a
happened
full
with mine
moon.
first. He was born on the
Yeah,
full
really?
moon, and it was completely packed, and the nurses said that. They're like, well, it's a full moon.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
And
sounds like a
he was
joke, but
early.
it's
He was
it's
early
serious,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had her the day after, I call it a guest date, my due date. So I had her the day after my due date. And yeah, labor started at like 2:30 in the morning. I think I was just settling in for bed and I was starting to get like crampy sensations. And then they were finding a pattern. I'm like, okay, I think I'm probably in early labor. And I should say, so at this point, I had supported over 50 women, probably more than that, in the birth process, like you know,
Wow.
uh, as a midwifery assistant, as a student midwife, a doula. So I had seen so many other women go through this process.
Yeah.
um, so I think I had a lot of that in the back of my head, like, oh, well, most first-time moms take a long time, so I should prepare myself to be in the birth process for maybe 24 hours, maybe 2 days. And I was also preparing myself to, maybe I'll go to 42 weeks, maybe I'll go to 44 weeks, like who knows? So I think that's why I was surprised when I went into labor the day after my due date because I was kind of amping myself up to, like don't be
Good chance.
surprised if it is a lot longer than you think. So yeah, I think I had a lot of other people's stories in my head, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Um, but what happened to me was definitely very surprising because I think I had kind of like a non-traditional thing happen to me. But so I was planning on having a midwife attend my birth. She was actually my business partner for a while and the midwife I was apprenticing with. And throughout my own pregnancy, I really started to shift my own personal philosophies of birth and like how I was showing up for women. And I made the decision pretty late in my pregnancy that I was just really feeling that I couldn't have her attend my birth. I don't know, it was just
Mm.
I guess I'll just be completely honest. I felt like her energy was getting kind of negative and our relationship was getting pretty complicated. And I felt like professionally we should probably separate. And I was just kind of sifting through all of that in my mind. And I just knew I could not have her at my birth. And I decided, I've heard all of these stories of women free birthing, and I just knew I could do it. I felt really confident. I felt so strong and I felt really healthy. And I just felt so connected with my baby. And I really knew that that was the way that I wanted to have, like, bring my daughter into the world. So, yeah, I went
Amazing.
into labor really early in the morning. I was really uncomfortable, of course, so I was kind of thrashing around in the bed next to my husband, and I didn't want to disrupt him. So I went downstairs onto the couch and I labored all night on the couch, tried to get as much sleep as I could, really couldn't get too much sleep, but I was really like processing all of the contractions and the surges, and I was just making my way through the birth process. And I think it was maybe like 7 o'clock in the morning where my husband woke up and realized I wasn't in bed next to me and kind of got worried and came downstairs and found me breathing through a contraction on the couch. And of course, I'm like, no, you can go back to bed. I'm fine. And of course, he wasn't going to be able to go back to sleep. So we were kind of up from there. I'm like, maybe I'll try to get some things checked off my to-do list before I have this baby.
Stop.
Because of course, at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I could be doing this for 2 more days. Like I'm setting
Right.
myself up for the marathon. I'm gonna make some bone broth, clean the floors,
Oh my goodness.
naive me, right? So
Yep.
so I literally did. I was like prepping some food. Because I was also kind of trying to distract myself from any of like the discomfort, right? So
Yeah.
I'm literally mopping my floors. At this point, it was maybe like 9 o'clock in the morning. And the surges were getting really, really powerful at this point. And I'm in the middle of mopping my floor. And every time a contraction would come, I would run over to my birth ball or like brace myself on the counter, and I would really have to focus and breathe through them. And it was getting really, really intense. And then I'm like, all right, I better finish mopping the floors quick because I don't think I can mop the floors for much longer. And And it's just really funny in hindsight. So it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a bit comical. But at that point, I'm like, I think I'm gonna get into the tub. I drew myself a bath. I have a really like special setup on my bathtub. I have like a really awesome iron bathtub.
Ooh.
Um, so I have like all sorts of crystals and candles set up and the windows right there. So my husband opened the window for me and it's April, so there's a little bit of a cool breeze and I'm just trying my best to get comfortable in the bathtub. I was kind of all over the place, like switching from the bed to the bathtub, sitting on the toilet, bracing myself on the sink, like kind of just running around all over my house, trying my best to get comfortable, which was, of course, quite a challenge. And then at one point, I had felt inside of myself and I could feel her head.
Okay.
And at that point, it was really, really intense and feeling like the hardness of her head and feeling how low her head was really gave me like that just gave me the confidence boost that I needed because I think I was probably in transition, and transition is famously the part of birth where women will say like I can't do this, I need some like pain relief, I need an epidural. Like that's normally when women are like
Yeah.
this is too intense, I'm throwing in the towel, I cannot do this.
Is that when the
um
shoulders are coming through?
so that's before that. Usually
Okay.
transition is like when women are becoming fully dilated. So like 8 to 10 centimeters. Like so right before the pushing phase, that's when women are like, whoa, this is really intense. I don't know how
Get me
much
out of
longer I can
here.
do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And then typically the pushing phase is where women kind of get their second wind because they feel like they're an active participant in their birth, if that makes sense. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can push, I can do something. That kind of usually gives women some encouragement. Um, so yeah, I felt her head and I think at that point, because of course I was training to be a midwife, so I was like familiar with cervical exams and stuff.
Yeah.
So I felt like maybe I wasn't completely dilated. So I kind of labored maybe for like 30 minutes to an hour longer. And I should say the whole time my husband was available, but I think he could really read my energy, and I was just not wanting too much support. Like for me, it was very much an internal process, very
Mm.
profoundly spiritual and transformative. Like it was really, really, and even like reflecting back on it, really profound experience, especially kind of doing it on my own, So he was there, like if I wanted a cool cloth or water or whatever, like he was there to support me, but he knew like to be very hands off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, we were both like, yeah, this might take a while longer. So we were, it's early April, so we were getting ready to start our garden. So he was like, you know what? I'm gonna give you some space. I'm gonna go out to the garden, but the window's open. So if you need anything, just call out to me and I'll be right here. So on his way to the garden, he went downstairs into the basement to water our starter plants. And at that point, so this is in, mind you, this is all happening within the span of maybe 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I feel inside myself again, and I felt what we would call like a bulging bag of waters. And basically it's just the like the bag of waters, like the amniotic sac that the baby's in. And I felt that I was definitely fully dilated. And I really just felt like the only thing holding my daughter back was this bag of like amniotic fluid. So I kind of went back and forth because at this point it is so intense. Every contraction is like really, really intense.
Wow.
And I had heard some women say that when a midwife or an obstetrician broke their waters, it made things more painful and more intense. So I'm
Mm,
like, all right, I definitely don't want that.
right.
But I had also heard some women say, especially women who were free birthing, say that they had this urge that they just intuitively felt like they wanted to break their waters. They did, and it relieved some of that pressure, and it actually felt better. So I went back and forth in my head. I'm like, okay, this is a little bit of a gamble. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, you know what? Intuitively, like, I should trust my intuition. I feel like if I'm able to release this fluid, that I'll feel better. So I broke my own water, and then instantly I felt the baby's head engaged. So it really was like that fluid in front of the baby's head was really kind of lifting the baby out of my pelvis, kind of. And once the waters broke all over the floor, she really engaged. And I got this irresistible urge to push. I say this irresistible urge to push, but I never really pushed. I really had what is called the fetal ejection reflex, which is where the
Wow.
uterine muscles
Hmm.
are pushing the baby out, basically. And
Yeah.
all I was kind of doing was being open and releasing and just like really like letting it happen and surrendering to the process.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So it's very
I felt
fast.
that first, like really intense, like, whoa, she's definitely engaged. And I was like, I should probably call for my husband. And then I had this thought, like, well, I've also seen women push for a very long time. I'm like, I don't know, this is my first baby. It might take a while. Then
Right.
the
Right.
next wave comes, and then I feel her move down significantly. And I'm like, all right, it's time to get my husband in here. So I'm calling his name, but he's in the basement, so he can't hear
Oh, no.
me. And then I don't even remember how many it was. It was either 3 or 5 surges, and then she was born. So I think like the first one came and it kind of brought me to my knees, and I'm in my bathroom to kind of like paint the picture. So it
Mhm.
brought me to my knees, and I'm on my hands and knees in my bathroom. And then yeah, within at least like 5 or less contractions, I caught her, and it was so freaky. She looked exactly like I did when I was a newborn, and it was just like really trippy. And I'm looking at her, like, and the first thing I said to her is, "You look just like me." And
Oh.
then I'm just looking at her. She's perfect. She's pink. She's screaming. And then my husband came in, or no, well, my I hear my husband shut the door, and I'm like, Matt, babe, like get up here. And it's so funny because I hear him walking up the stairs, like, hey, mama, what's up? Just like so nonchalant, has no
Yeah.
clue that I just birthed our baby, and that he totally missed the whole thing. And he opens the door and was just like, whoa, you did it! Like, good job. And it was just like so fun. It was
Awesome.
like a really funny response. I feel like a lot of guys wouldn't probably have that response, um, but yeah,
Oh, that's so beautiful.
it was so intense, so painful, like really, really painful. But it was also so simple, so straightforward, so sweet. And it was so drama free. And it was really the perfect experience. And I am so glad that I trusted my intuition throughout my pregnancy. I held strong, firm boundaries, which is really something I've had issues with in the past. I'm very much a people pleaser. And I just held my boundaries. I stuck to my guns. I just like surrendered to the process. I trusted my intuition, and everything went really perfectly. And it was, yeah, really profound, really transformational, so many lessons. And I always joke that the birth of my daughter, like my pregnancy, the birth itself, and the postpartum period was so healing for me. Like I healed so much within myself, mentally and spiritually, but also physically. I had, like, just to go into a little bit, I had some pelvic floor dysfunction, and like really birthing my daughter healed it. I don't I don't know like the specifics of it, or
That's
like the
okay.
technicalities or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't need to. Like a lot of the issues that I was having before, just like everything resolved, and I really like came into balance.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just been so perfect. I had such a smooth and gentle transition into motherhood. And I really do have to give a shout out to my wonderful husband for supporting me emotionally. My family has been so supportive. I mean, my sister's hanging out with my little baby downstairs so I could come on this podcast. So yeah, I'm just really
Yeah.
so grateful for like my community and my friends and my family for being in my corner and supporting me, especially where I had like kind of an unorthodox pregnancy and birth. You know, like most women go to the
Yeah.
hospital and have a doctor, and you know, I'm just really
Yeah.
glad that everybody trusted me.
Yeah, definitely. And most importantly, yourself. You trusted
Yeah,
yourself and your body, which is amazing. And I think it's so valuable and important for women to hear stories like this because there's so many of the, nightmare stories out there
yeah,
about birth and there's so much fear associated with birth. So I think it's really important to know that that's not always the case. Yes, there was
yeah,
pain and that yes, there was discomfort. Yes, you had to go through this profound, you know, thing that your body had never done before, but you also trusted your body that it knew what to do, that
yeah,
it was made for this essentially. And had such a spiritual and beautiful and healing experience, which is just great and amazing.
yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think my experience really lit a fire under me to like pour more of myself into my birth work and to like really make sure I'm showing up for women like in full integrity and yeah, just supporting women like in that full capacity. Um
Yeah.
So it really like inspired me to change some of my offerings into, you know, like right after my daughter was born, I like totally rebranded my business. It's funny, like the very like last weeks of my pregnancy into like maybe the first month of my daughter's life, I was finishing up an online birth course. Um, so yeah, it really like really the whole experience like guided me to help me like create these new offerings for women and just kind of like I felt like those were some things that was needed in my community based on what I was seeing. So yeah, it was like I always joke, I joke that, and maybe it's not a joke, maybe I'm being serious, but I feel like my daughter specifically was the guiding force, like her spiritually, like her even like before she was born, like her
I
spirit self was who was guiding me through this. And it's just like so
love that.
cool. And I can't, like, she's already taught me so much. She has taught me more in this 4 months than I've ever learned in my whole life. And I am just so excited to see like what my children have to teach me. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
cool.
I love that so much. That's beautiful. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is too intimate to share, but how did you actually break your waters?
So, I tried to break it with my fingernails, but I don't know if I was just getting too much collagen in my diet through my pregnancy. It was like a really strong, which is probably why my waters hadn't broken before, was because I had like a really strong bag of waters. And I took I had like a little dental tool and I just kind of made like a speculum with my fingers and I just poked it. And my waters broke all over the floor. And then, like I shared, instantly she engaged. So, and it was funny because I usually tell women, I try not to tell women like what the right or wrong thing is. But sometimes, especially in medical birth, especially like in hospital settings, sometimes doctors and midwives are a little too gung-ho to break a woman's water because it can kind of speed things along. And
Right.
sometimes it makes things more painful, or sometimes complications can arise due to breaking the waters before they're ready. So like infection or sometimes like the labor will stall and then, you know, the cascade of interventions, like we say
Right.
sometimes in the birth world, like the dominoes will fall and it'll go from this intervention to this intervention to this intervention. Next thing you know, she's having a C-section and this is not the birth she wanted. So normally I tell women, like, push off them, they call it artificial rupture of membranes. So I say, like, push off that as long as you can. Like, usually you don't want that. So that's why I was kind of like back and forth, like, "Ugh, should I do this or should I just let my body do its thing?" But I
Yeah.
just, I intuitively, I was like, I just want to do this and I should just do it, like, whatever. And
Yeah.
I found a way to do it and it worked. So yeah, I don't know if I would recommend like using random dental tools to any women that are listening, but that is kind of what I had available. I didn't have, like, normally, like, medically, right? They have like actual medical instruments
Right,
that
right,
they would
right.
use, but
Yeah,
I haven't been practicing medical midwifery in that capacity, you know what I mean? So I didn't have any of
yeah.
that stuff, but
No, it's good
it
to put
worked
the
out really well
disclaimer
for
in
me.
there.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, and it sounds like even though it was painful, you're pretty relaxed during the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a bit on edge for a little
Okay.
for a little of it. Like I remember you know, my husband's really great and I think he asked me, he was trying to like relate to what I was going through.
Right.
So he asked me,
Mm.
what does it feel like? And an innocent question, but I was like mid contraction when he asked me that. And I feel bad because I totally snapped on him. And I'm like, I just started crying and I'm like, what a stupid question. Why would you say that to me right now? And you know, he totally didn't take it personally. He was, you know,
Good.
whatever. And then after, you know, the wave has left and I'm not in pain anymore and horribly uncomfortable. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you were just trying to help. And he was like, you don't have to apologize. I get it. So he was really understanding. And I think that was probably why he was like, all right, I'm kind of going to give you some space because
Yeah.
clearly, you know, clearly you don't want anybody to talk to you, touch you, look at you. So, but yeah, for the most part, I just was really trusting the process. I think it did kind of help that I had attended so many births before, and also I had researched birth so much in like the few years before my own birth experience. I think that can go both ways
Yeah.
because for a lot of birth attendants who have a lot of secondhand trauma from traumatic births that they've attended, that can be a lot to sort through like your own experience. So
Yeah.
in during my pregnancy, I did a lot of, I guess you could call it shadow work, like a lot of deconditioning, a lot of very intentional practices to release other people's stories, release their trauma. And sometimes, like, it wouldn't even be like from the woman's perspective, she felt like she didn't have a traumatic birth experience, but sometimes, like, from my perspective as the doula or the birth attendant, I kind of like saw things from a different perspective. So I really
Mm.
had to release that and say, like, those are their stories. That's not my story. And kind of like hold space for them in my heart, but
Yeah.
also let it go, release that, and just let my story be my own. So yeah, I had to do a lot of that in my own like pregnancy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was curious about the relaxed part because so I have three kids and the first child, my first birth, I actually asked, and this was in California at the time, we were living in LA. I asked my doctor, my OBGYN, if, I said, I want to have a natural birth without drugs. And my doctor's response was no.
Wow.
She said, and it was a woman, and she said, no, you're not doing that because when you get to the labor, you're gonna want drugs. She's like, do you take Tylenol for a headache? And I said, well, yeah. And she said, yeah, you're gonna want drugs. It's gonna be the
Wow.
worst pain of your life. And so I just sort of was like, okay, talk about people pleasing, right? it,
Yeah.
it just sort of like cut me off from that option. So I
Yeah.
was like, I guess I'll do what my doctor is telling me. I still had it in my
Yeah.
mind that I wanted that, but I didn't pursue it because I didn't have
Yeah.
the options available, at least through the person that was supposed to be helping me with that.
Yeah. And
Um,
how much more difficult would that be if even if you were dead set on having a natural birth, when your support team is saying, you can't do that, you're going, like, trust me, I'm the expert. You're going to want the epidural. You're going to want the pain medication. So
exactly.
that, so even if you were like, no, I'm gonna push for this, I'm gonna try my best to hang in there. Because even through my birth process, if I was in a hospital setting and somebody was saying, Nikki, just take the epidural, like, don't be a hero, you don't have to do this.
Right.
Trust me, like, no one can do this. This is crazy. I might have said, yeah, you're right. This is really painful,
And that's
so
exactly what it was. It was like, don't be a hero, like just
yeah,
have the option for drugs, just numb it, right? And it
yeah,
was like, oh yeah, and my mother had all three of her children naturally without drugs, so I just assumed I would do that. But then
yeah.
when it came to that, it was like my first child, right? So you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I guess I'll go along with what I'm told by the professionals, by the
Hmm.
experts. So of course, when I went into labor, it was painful. I wasn't prepared at all,
Yeah.
so I accepted the epidural. And the luckily and thankfully the birth was very smooth.
Hmm.
But I felt very sad after because, well, not
Yeah.
sad, but no, I was very happy about my baby, but I didn't like the part that I couldn't feel it, that I was
Yeah.
from my waist down. I was like, this is my like the biggest, most profound experience of my life. And I was numb. I didn't feel a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Pain isn't
And
always a bad thing. And I think as like modern women and just like modern people, it's hard to kind of wrap our heads around that sometimes.
yeah,
Sometimes there is a very profound lesson in pain and discomfort. Um,
yeah. And it felt surreal, right? It didn't, pain has this effect of bringing you into the present. Like you're
yeah.
alive when you're in pain. So it felt very surreal. Like I was like, is this really happening? Like I was very disconnected from it in that way.
Yeah.
It was like I could see the baby, but I just couldn't, feel anything. So I guess maybe I just had, I like to feel things. Like maybe that's just part
Yeah.
of who I am. But I decided for my next birth that I was going to put the effort in and
Yeah.
intentionally prepare myself for a natural birth, regardless, of what anyone else said. And I let my doctor know that. And so I discovered something called hypnobirthing. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
ever,
I
okay.
do. Yeah, I actually, I'm a big fan of hypnobirthing. I like a lot of their philosophies.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening to me. I read the book and they were just talking about how, women have been giving birth for hundreds of thousands of years without drugs. And I was like, oh yeah, like this is only a very recent phenomenon that we've had all this medical intervention in birth. And so, obviously it's possible, right? And I also want to say that sometimes medical intervention is necessary. Sometimes, there's a place for that, but it's not necessary all the time. And so I did have, I planned to have Cassidy, my daughter, in the hospital, but I very much practice, they have like actual like recorded guided self-hypnosis. That's how it works. And so I did that. I practiced that for, the months before my daughter's birth. I even did it with my husband sometimes. Like he would join me on the couch and we'd be listening. It was very relaxing. And like that whole philosophy is that the woman's body relaxes, the birth is easier because it's about opening and, like you said, surrender to the process rather than if you're scared, you're going to clench up and it's actually going to restrict
Mm.
everything in your body. and it's going to make it harder and more painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I
that,
also
yeah,
I enjoyed in that book. So I don't, there's a couple different hypnobirthing books, but I read the book
okay.
by Sophie Fletcher.
Yeah.
So in that book, I like how she kind of included hospital births too, because I find sometimes in some of these more natural modalities, they either gear it towards like women birthing in the hospital or home births. And I really appreciated how she geared it for all settings.
Yeah.
A lot of most women actually birth in hospitals,
Hmm.
and a lot of women do, for whatever reason, they do want to birth in that setting. And
Hmm.
I'm not like an absolutist. I firmly believe that women should birth in whatever setting they feel most comfortable in. I don't believe in like this weird hierarchy of birth. Um,
Yeah.
and it is important for women to have resources, to have a birth that's as natural as possible in the hospital.
Yeah. I think it's super empowering because often, again, we have a doctor tell us something, and even if it doesn't resonate with us or doesn't align with our point of view or values, we just sometimes will go along with it because they're
Hmm.
the authority, right? So having access to other, resources and information, it empowers you to make a choice that really
Yeah.
feels supportive.
Hmm.
So what happened was the hypnobirthing worked great because similar to you, I was like in labor. I started in the morning. I was actually at work and I continued to work during the day, having contractions.
Yeah.
I came home in the afternoon and doing my breathing, and we, had dinner. We watched a little TV. And at that point, I was like, these are speeding up. These are getting a little more intense. I think we should call your mom. So my mother-in-law was planning to come and watch our son while we went to the hospital. So we did. And it took her about an hour to get there. Even I think she was taking her time because again, the whole idea is this is going to be a while, right? But by the time she got there, I was literally like I couldn't, stand up all the way because they had really just ramped up over that hour. So we flew to the hospital. It was about 10 minutes away. And when I got out of the car, my water broke and we went to the door and it was locked. We went to the wing that had the OBGYN part of the hospital, or the labor and delivery, I should say, and couldn't get in. And I was banging on the door. Apparently, we should have gone to the main entrance or the emergency room. Didn't know that it was closed past 10. So I was banging on the door, screaming at the top of my lungs. And eventually a janitor comes and opens it. And he offered me a wheelchair. He said, sit down and I'll take you to the labor and delivery. And I said, no, I can't sit down. There's a baby coming out of me. And he's like, no, no, you've got plenty of time, hon. It's okay. And I was like, no, I don't. And I actually dropped to my hands and knees, gave birth to her right there in the lobby, like barely made it
Wow.
to the lobby. So, so it was very fast, very like it was almost like the hypnobirthing worked a little too well, but but it was, yeah, it was super effective. And I thought it was really interesting what you said about the child, um, connecting with the spirit of the child even before the birth and the wisdom that the child brings. Because I do think that happened. I do think that she helped me, and we actually nicknamed my daughter Get out of the way Cassidy, because she's like that, right? She's just very like a forceful personality, just a force of nature. Like she lights up the room. And since the day of her birth, and before, that's just been who she is.
Yeah.
So, and we are very connected as well. And not that I'm not connected with my son, but I just love what you said about, it being when you're able to be present with it, when you're able to really be there for it, it can be this very spiritual experience. And then I had my third birth, and this time I'd learned from the second time around. I was like, okay, I'm doing it without drugs, but I'm going to get to the hospital in plenty of time. And I ended up driving myself to the hospital that time, just so that, we didn't have to wait too long. And I was, my mom was there, my husband was there, the nurses were there, and I did have that moment, the transition when I was like, I can't do this. I
Hmm.
can't do this. I want to run away. And the nurse, she said, let go of the fear. Just, you have to let go of the fear. And my mom also said something similar. And in that moment, I just turned inward, right? And there's all this fear and like chaos, but then in my energetic field, but then I went inward and I found this place of peace where nothing could touch it. Nothing, no fear could get into it. And I was like, oh, I'm okay. And the pain wasn't even there. Like there was not, it was just peace. And then in that moment, she was born. My daughter's
Wow.
born. So yeah, it was like, wow, like I can access that calm center in myself. I didn't know that before that birth. It gave me that knowing that even when there's fear and pain, there's actually a part of me that's like kind of beyond that. It's like the
Yeah.
eye of the storm. So it was like just a really beautiful experience.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's so, I just love that. It seems like you had very different lesson that you got, or like different takeaway from each of your births.
Yeah. Yeah, they taught
Mm.
me so much each
Yeah.
time. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as I'm sure you agree, like birth can be that for women, right? It can be this almost transformative experience, a spiritual experience. Like it's giving life. It's like it's kind of a big deal. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah. I think for a long time, birth was seen as this like punishment to women. I mean, I hear a lot of like the victim mentality coming in for like a lot of women where it's almost like they feel punished by their bodies, either like because of painful periods or the birth process. And unfortunately, a lot of women will be very quick to share like all of the negative aspects, right? And of course everyone's like, "Oh, it's the best day of your life. You're welcoming your child into the world." But I had even very young, I had a lot of women say it's the worst pain you'll ever feel. You like just like a very negative spin on it.
Yeah.
And that's why when I share my story, it is possible to share like, yeah, it was intense, it was painful, but that's okay. And I also got all of this out of it as well. It can be a very dynamic situation, and I think it's there's so much we can learn from it, and we don't have to run away from the pain. We don't have to run away from the experience of birth. Like it's not a punishment. It's an honor.
Yeah.
And I have been really working to like reframe birth for a lot of women in that way, because I do think I see so much fear surrounding birth, in
Hmm.
many different ways, mainly the pain, but a lot of people are also afraid of complications, like emergencies, becoming a mother, that can be like a really big fear for women. So through my work, like when I'm working with women prenatally, that's a big part of my work with women is breaking down some of those fears, like giving a voice to the fears, because it's okay to talk about it and it's actually
Yeah.
very therapeutic to talk about it. And like, let's break down some of that fear and let's create like strength around that. Because when you try to ignore it, when you try to ignore your fears, they're still there. So sometimes it's better to shine a light on it, and that's when real healing can take place.
That's really awesome that you're doing that. I just think that's amazing work. and coaching women throughout the experience of their pregnancy, that is a time that we need a special kind of support and giving that holding that space for them to really connect with themselves and allow themselves to have the full experience of pregnancy and birth, which is such a special time and can hold so much wisdom and beauty. And, if you allow it to do that. So yeah, I really appreciate you bringing your light into the world.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Well, amazing. I'm so glad we had this conversation. It's been really wonderful sharing with you and connecting with you. What's the best way for women to connect with you and ask you questions?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so on my website, bornfreefamily.com,
Hmm.
I have a lot of information on there about my different offerings. And I also have a contact form where if somebody wanted to get in touch with me, they could absolutely send me a message on there. And I also have a lot of free resources on my website for women to take advantage of.
Great.
So yeah, and then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as bornfree.wellness.
Okay, great. And I will make sure, obviously, that those are in the show notes for people
Awesome.
to get in touch with you. So thank you so much, Nikki, for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a really, really great conversation. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, go enjoy your baby.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you next time on the Feminine Frequency.